Okay. Guys, lovely to see you. I'm going to start the brocha. I'm having you in mind, if you can have this in mind. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher k'nishan b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Baruch na Adonai Eloheinu b'divrei Toratcha b'finu v'fi'cha beit Yisrael. V'niyeh anachnu v'tzeitzeinu v'tzeitzeimcha beit Yisrael. Kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei Toratach lishma. Baruch atah Adonai l'mei Torah l'emo Yisrael.
Amen.
Amen.
Okay. So I'm the only person redhead that gets sunburnt in the middle of winter during Joburg. So I was reading the Gemara and I fell asleep in the sun, and I've got this I had a slight temperature and got sunburned. Pathetic. But anyway, I've got redhead. There's nothing I can do in the heart of winter.
Well, you look like King David, so it's perfect. This is quite a thing for us.
I should have that sort of midah, but anyway.
But you're well read anyway, Damon.
That's cute.
Yeah, that's very clever, Kevin.
Okay, so let me I can't minimize when I'm recording the meeting. Oh, okay, I've learned something. All right. So we're on 8b1, and what we were discussing last time, just as a summary, is that how do people can choose not to avail themselves of a rabbinic enactment, or they can choose to avail themselves if it's for their protection. And we were talking about a buyer that chooses to, if he buys various grades of land, to not say last bought protection, if it'll be to his detriment if he buys a superior land last. And how do we know this? From Rav Huna, that said if a woman decides to say to her husband, I don't want to receive food from you, and I will not work and give you my income. That enactment of giving her husband her income was a rabbinic enactment to protect her so that he could look after her. That if she's earning more money than him, then she'll say to him, keep your grace, keep your stuff, and let me keep my income. So that's where we ended off. Now we're going to be hitting quite an interesting spot about multiple buyers, about liens. Guys, can you mark yourself, because I'm hearing food and cutting and foams and everything. And I don't mind if you eat with pleasure. You're probably starving and need breakfast. It's cool. As long as you can mute yourself, that'll be great. All right, so we're starting off on 8b1. Just as a creditor is entitled to collect a debt from encumbered properties that have been sold to a buyer, he may collect the land even if the buyer sells the property in turn to a second buyer. The Gemara now discusses the laws that would apply if a buyer such as the one described in the previous brisa, who purchased 3 grades of land from a debtor who owed money to a damaged party, a lender, and a woman for her ketubah, and purchased the superior land last, sold some of the properties to a second buyer. So what this case is exactly the same as the previous one. In other words, the person, the first buyer had 3 grades of land, and he bought the superior quality land last, and he wanted to sell some of the properties to a second buyer. Now, there's going to be 2 arguments that ensue. And Gavin, this is where you have to pay attention, because it was a question that you asked originally. Is a lien on the encumbered property, does it stem from the fact that it belongs to the debtor at the time that he incurred the debt? Thus, the property remains mortgaged to a debt even if it's sold to a succession of buyers? Or is the lien on the grade of land itself? So this is going to play out in 2 different opinions, and we're going to see it now. So, okay. So it's obvious that if the aforementioned buyer sold the average and inferior land to another buyer, and he left over superior land, which he had purchased last for himself, then all the 3 creditors may come and collect from the superior land. For 2 reasons, guys. It's the last land that he purchased, and he no longer has the average and inferior land in his possession, which would enable him to say to the lender and the woman respectively, collect instead from average and inferior land, because I do not wish to avail myself of the rabbinic decree. Okay, so remember there, what the case of it is that even if the buyer bought the superior land last, he's entitled to have the creditors collect from the grade of land which they would normally have received, because he can waive the rabbinic enactment allowing creditors to collect from the last land purchase, on the grounds that in this case the enactment is not to his advantage. Remember, initially it was to the buyer's advantage, because if the buyer bought land, in order to protect the buyer, as long as he left the debtor with a grade of land, then all the creditors could collect from the original debtor, and this would protect the buyer. But if the buyer bought three grades of land in succession and superior quality land last, he didn't want to pay the lender from superior quality land, nor the ketubah of a woman. So in that case, he decided to revoke the rabbinic enactment for his benefit to buy from the last property, even though he left no land from the debtor. Because he's got all grades of land, he's quite happy to give each one their respective land. But he can't play games with the second buyer. What sort of games can he play with the second buyer? He could say to himself, I tell you what, let me sell the superior quality land, because that was the last land I bought. And the rabbinic enactment meant that the last land bought would be where all the creditors would come and collect for the damager, the lender, and the ketubah of a woman. So let me sell that superior land. If I'm going to sell any grade of land, let me sell that last land, because that's where the property lien is, to a second buyer. So if everybody comes to collect, they will collect that land from the second buyer, not from me, because it's got that rabbinic enactment that the last land purchased is what's to be collected, and that was my superior land. So the lien is on that property. And what it's saying here is as follows, is that he can't do that, because the rabbinic enactment was made for the benefit of every buyer, of all buyers, not just the first buyer. And since two buyers are involved here, and the enactment in this case benefits the second buyer, the first buyer can't demand that it not be implemented at the expense of the second buyer. That's according to the Nimukei Yosef. Guys, before I go on, is there any questions here?
No, I'm cool.
No questions.
Okay.
No questions.
So basically, he's got the average and inferior land, and he sold just the superior land. So we want to know, what is the law? Because there's two opinions. Do the creditors have the right to collect the superior land from the second buyer or not? Okay, so here are the two opposing viewpoints. The first viewpoint is a buyer. Not a buyer as in the person that purchases, but rather a buyer. Okay, A-B-A-Y-E. So what does he thought to say? That in this case, all three creditors can come and collect from the superior land held by the second buyer. Okay, so he says that if the first buyer sold the superior land to the second buyer, all three creditors can come to the second buyer and collect from that superior land. That's the position of a buyer.
Okay. I might have hit the wrong thing. I'm on my laptop.
Right,
it's a bit small.
Okay, I'm recording.
Okay. All right. So we left off in a buyer's opinion that said all three creditors can come and collect from the superior land held by the second buyer. So why does a buyer say that, guys? What do you think?
Because I think so. This is my thing. Because you asked me the question.
Sure.
So let me try answer it. I'm not sure. It was quite tricky. I'll be honest. So my thing is that when the buyer bought it, he was fully aware of the fact that there was incumbent liens on it. So he's still responsible for that because of the fact that it was the last piece of land. So all the rights of that land passed through to the second buyer. So he's responsible to pay out, in theory, all three of the. He's supposed to pay the damaged party, the widow, and the other. What's the other one?
The lender.
But there's a different opinion. That's his opinion. Other people don't say that.
Okay, so according to a buyer, you're partially right, according to your opinion of a buyer. because the rights there, we just said the opposite, but I know what you're trying to say. So I'm going to give you credit for the right part of what you said. And then I'll just correct the slightly other part.
Yeah, it's quite tricky. So thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure. So a buyer is saying something very straightforward, guys, that the lien on the property is on the property itself, not on the grade of land.
Okay.
Just that's all he's saying. We're not talking about rights here, because the rights would actually go to the second buyer, that protective right also. In other words, if we look at the rabbinic right, that gets transferred to the second buyer. So it's the opposite. So let's just keep it very clean and straightforward. A buyer believes that the lien is on that particular property. And if you sell it to a succession of buyers, it's still on that particular piece of property. Okay? Like how we hold modern law today. That's how we hold modern law.
So therefore passes to the next buyer.
Correct.
All the rights.
Not the rights, the lien on the property. In fact, to
No, what I was saying, the rights and obligations to...
The obligations. We're going to discuss the rights right now. But the obligations, meaning if you want to keep it simple in your head, a buyer is stating that the lien is on that particular piece of property, and no matter how many buyers it goes to from the debtor, the collection point is on that particular piece of property. Okay.
But it wasn't. I just want to just mention something. Sorry, Damon, because I did prep for this. I read this, and I had a slight bit of confusion here. So I just wanted to just get some.
I'm going to clear it up. Give me a few minutes. Give me a few.
All right.
I will clear it up. Yes, I will. So in your head, I've gone through this also a few times. It is confusing, but let's just keep it simple. A buyer believes on that particular property that it is incumbent in the lien of what's owing, no matter how many buyers there are, will keep being transferred. That's all. Rava has a different opinion. Rava says what has come to the first buyer was sold to the second, all rights that come to his hand. Let me explain to you what that means. So you got a little confused between Rava and a buyer. So Rava is saying this, right? That the second buyer acquires any rights that the first buyer had in the superior land he purchased. So what does this mean? So and since the lender and the woman come to the first buyer to collect the superior quality land before he sold it, he would have been able to force them to collect from average and inferior land. And even though when the first buyer bought the average and inferior land, the superior land was still in the debtor's possession and unencumbered. And the law is that creditors cannot collect from encumbered properties as long as they're unencumbered properties in the debtor's possession. So this is what we're actually saying, guys. Is we're saying that what's the rabbinical enactment there to protect the buyer? So what it means here is as follows, is that if I buy property from the debtor, right, and people come to me and I don't know that he owes money on the land, and people come to me, I can turn around and say, go collect from the debtor because he's still got unencumbered property. Say a damager comes to me and says to me, no, I want your superior quality land. And you need to pay me superior quality land because I'm a damaged party. I could say, listen, the debtor only has inferior land left. I left you land of which you could claim directly from the debtor because your business is with him. And the debtor would the damaged party would turn around to me and said, no, but I'm entitled to superior land. I could turn around and say, listen, the rabbinic enactment is to protect me, the buyer. And as long as there's some unencumbered property from the debtor, you need to collect from him. The fact that it's not the grade you deserve, I hear that, I sympathize, but it has nothing to do with me. There's unencumbered land with the debtor. You have an original arrangement with him. Even if it's inferior quality land or average land, you need to collect from him. There's land of which you can collect. Therefore, I'm protected by rabbinic decree as a buyer. And what Rava is saying is that the second buyer, when he purchases the rights from the first buyer, he enjoys that rabbinic enactment, that rabbinic protection. The first buyer can't turn around and say, listen, I revoked it because I had 3 grades of land, okay? I had 3 grades of land, therefore the rabbinic enactment didn't suit me. Because that rabbinic enactment was there to suit all buyers. So the first buyer can't dump his responsibilities onto the second buyer. Do you get what I'm saying? The fact that he chose not to enforced the enactment is because that enactment for the buyer's benefit didn't suit him when he had 3 grades of land. He wanted each of the... Marco, just let me finish a sec. He wanted each of the creditors to collect from their parcel of land. Now, the rule is, this is the rule, as long as the buyer has 3 parcels of land, he can revoke that rabbinic enactment of the last land bought. Do you get what I'm saying? But not if he doesn't have all 3 grades of land with which to satisfy the creditors. I'm done. Any questions?
So just one part I don't understand about this whole discussion.
Yeah.
Why? And maybe because I don't understand. I mean, why would a buyer, the first buyer, choose to not revoke the land, or choose not to use the rabbinical decree? Just explain that to me.
With pleasure, with absolute pleasure. It's a great question. This is the fact. If there was a land left that the debtor had, that rabbinic decree is wonderful for a buyer, because he could go to anybody trying to claim from him and say, listen, go back to the person that owes you money, the original debtor. He's got unencumbered property. Go and collect from him. Okay? Yes. So that protects me as a buyer, because I don't know, there's like worms that came out of a closet. This morning I had 2 people at my door wanting money.
Yeah.
So that's to protect me. But if I bought land in succession, if I bought all 3 grades of land in one go, I could tell each of the creditors to collect from their respective land. What we learned in 8A4 and 8B1 is that if he bought the land, a single buyer in succession, and he bought the superior quality land last, he has a problem. Then people come to him and he says, no, listen, I'm going to return the title deed to the original landowner if you try and get a grade of land that isn't due to you. And he had all this drama. And in actual fact, we learn that he doesn't have to go through all this drama, because he can choose not to avail himself of the rabbinic enactment because it was there to protect him. But in the case where he bought the superior quality land last, he doesn't want everybody to collect from the superior quality land except the damaged party. He doesn't want a lender or a ketubah of a woman to collect from his superior land. So he can say, listen, that enactment was there for my benefit as a buyer, to force somebody to go back to the debtor. And that's why the last grade of land bought means that their property that's unencumbered by the debtor. But since I bought all 3 grades of land, I don't want to enact that, because now I have to give out my superior land. So if the enactment was for my protection as a buyer, I choose not to avail myself of this rabbinic enactment. And we learned the case of a woman and her ketubah, that you can do such a thing. Now, in this particular case, he's trying to get cute. So the first buyer is trying to sell the superior land to the second buyer, because the property lien is on that property according to a buyer. But according to Rabbi, he said, no, you can't get cute, the first buyer, because that rabbinic decree that you have to collect from the last land, now you've dumped it on a second buyer, and you were enjoying your average and inferior land, and that last land you bought your superior land, you just sold it to a second buyer so everybody can bug him. And that's not good enough. The lien isn't on that particular property. Firstly, it's on the grade of land, and then secondly, a buyer saying that rabbinic enactment was not there to protect the first buyer. It was there to protect every buyer, which means that when the second buyer bought it, he thought he was buying. He didn't know that privately the first buyer didn't avail himself to that rabbinic enactment because it didn't suit him. So now that second buyer bought the land and thought he'd be protected, because he thought the first buyer, who had inferior and average quality of land, anybody that would buy that land, anybody that would try and claim the land from him, a normal lender, he could turn around the second buyer and say, listen, I left property at which you could collect from the first buyer. I left average land and I left inferior land. So the woman for your ketubah, go to the first buyer and collect the land due to you. And the lender, listen, there's land that you can collect, because that rabbinic enactment suits me as the second buyer. And what's that rabbinic enactment? That if there's unencumbered property of which the buyer has purchased, any debts have to be paid from that unencumbered property to protect the buyer. So the second buyer is the same as the first buyer, is entitled to that protection. The fact that the first buyer didn't suit him when he can only revoke that rabbinic enactment if he's got all 3 grades of land. Because in that case, to collect from the last superior land doesn't suit him. So he can revoke it providing he's got all 3 grades of land. But he can't sod the second, he can't saddle the second buyer with the problem and think it's just going to protect him.
So you're saying that the person can revoke it, can revoke it because he's got all 3 grades of land.
Yes.
If someone comes to him, he can give from the other quality land.
Yes.
Because, he has it.
Yes.
He has it.
If he has all 3 grades of land, he doesn't have to revoke that rabbinic enactment that the last property is for collection. Because it no longer suits him.
Okay, a second question. How can you just give back, the situation where you're like forced to, have to give your superior land and you go and say, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll go give the title deeds of my inferior land back to the debtor. How can you just give back title?
It's a brilliant question, Marco. I was waiting for somebody to ask this. Guys, listen to Marco's question. It's a brilliant question. I was waiting for somebody to be awake. You get the question of the day, Marco. Yeshakayach, Chana. That is the question. All right, just repeat your question for everybody so they can see how brilliant it is. I can explain it.
Well, I don't say brilliant because I don't feel brilliant. I feel quite stupid. Actually.
No, it's a brilliant question. I'll tell you what. Just ask it again, aloud, slowly for everybody.
So when a buyer, any buyer, is in a position where a creditor comes and tries to force them to give superior land, and the buyer says, "I tell you, I'm not going to do that because you're not entitled to that." And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually give the title deeds back of the inferior land that I have to the original debtor, and you can go and go sort it out with them. And my question is, how can you just give back title deeds?
Okay, so let me answer this question. It's a brilliant question. It's actually brought on the daf on page 8A3, okay, on note number 25. And there's an opinion of the Rosh and the Rashba. The Rashba brings the case of 8B. And the expression, I'm going to answer your question now, Michael, but this is the source. The Rosh on note 3, the Rashba in terms of 8B, it's on the daf, the 8A3 daf on note 25, okay, from the Milchamos Hashem, okay? So this is the answer. You are completely correct. The expression, I will return the deed to the owner, is actually technically imprecise. For the original sale cannot be undone by simply returning the deed. Rather, the Gemara means that the buyer can threaten to perform a legal kinyan, whereby the seller would reacquire the field. I'll explain how it works. Guys, whose phone's doing that?
Come on.
Okay. So let me just explain to you.
Dustin. Sorry about that.
All right. Let me just return to what we were discussing. So, Marco, you're completely correct. The expression, please, Gavin, can you put your mic on mute if you don't mind, because I'm hearing my own voice in the recording. It's bouncing back. Sorry, mate. Okay.
No problem.
All right. So, Marco, it's a colloquial term. It's legally imprecise. You're completely correct. When I use the term, I'm going to return the deed to the owner. It's an expression of frustration. Are you with me? According to the Rosh and Rashba, it's technically imprecise. You can't just return the deed. You actually have to go to the Beis Din, and what they do is they can make a legal kinyan where the seller would have to reacquire the field. This would be a proper legal case.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
You can't just come in. It's a document. Yeah. It's a shtar. You can't just come and throw the deed back at him. You have to actually go and have a legal case and say, listen, this guy sold me a packet of lies. I asked him, is this the case? And he turned around to me and he said, no, there's no problem or whatever. I've got all this drama. I'm going to return the inferior title deed. They can all collect from him. And then the Beis Din would force him to reacquire the field. There's property that's sold with a guarantee, and we're going to hit this issue of what does it mean with the guarantee. Okay, but you are completely correct.
Can I just throw in one more quick one?
Yeah, sure.
So the other thing is, when you buy property, is it your obligation as a buyer to get a full inquiry on all the land that the seller's selling to you and whether the liens on it and what's encumbered, not encumbered?
Exactly.
Is it your obligation to actually have to do that?
So there are two points that we need to address. The first one is that if the buyer themselves did not do proper due diligence, you have got a problem where it's called buying a bag of air. Now, let me explain to you what the Gemara's term is, buying a bag of air. In the old days, if you bought a kit bag full of goods and you didn't check the goods before you left the store, and the goods are not correct to what you purchased, it's your fault.
It's like footsteps. That's what I thought when I read it.
Yeah, to a certain extent, it means you didn't do your due diligence to check it properly. Okay? Right. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is that it could be a case where when you did your investigation, often people buy a business and the books are cooked. Meaning the perception of what you're buying and what was shown to you is not really the facts on the ground. Right. And that, in fact, is misrepresentation. Right. So this is a case for the Beis Din to determine. Now, property, guys, is generally sold with a guarantee, meaning the default position is that property is sold with a guarantee, and that if it is admitted in the contract, it's known as a scribal oversight, and not that it wasn't sold without a guarantee. It's merely if the contract has the term sold without a guarantee that no guarantee would apply. Does that make sense? In other words, it goes so far, and we're going to learn this, as to say that all properties are sold with a guarantee. And if it states, because you must know, Marco, that these cases got worse and worse until the Beis Din enacted certain protective measures for the buyer. You get what I'm saying? Like a guarantee. Yeah. So in other words, you're saying, well, why did it go through all this stuff? Because this is a succession of centuries or decades where things got worse and worse and worse. And eventually the law gets more sophisticated as the criminals get more sophisticated. So eventually property is sold with a guarantee, to the extent that even if the word guarantee isn't in a contract, it's seen as a omission on the fault of the contract drafter, but not that the property is sold without a guarantee. Only if the word is sold without a guarantee doesn't mean there's no guarantee. Yes. Okay. All right. So, guys, so the first buyer can say to the creditors, I do not wish to avail myself of this decree. The second buyer is also able to say to the creditors, collect from average and inferior land. For when the second buyer bought the land, he bought it with the intention of acquiring all the rights that the first buyer possessed therein. Accordingly, the first buyer must satisfy the claims of the creditors. So, Gavin, that is the position of Rava, that the protection held that you can't collect the superior land from the second buyer is, according to Rava's case, a buyer saying that the property lien is on that particular property and not on the greater property. You get what I'm saying? So I knew you were trying to say, even though you didn't say it correctly in terms of the thing, but I understood what you were trying to say. So let's just keep it very simple. A buyer saying that the lien is on that property, no matter how many successive buyers. And Rava was saying that the first buyer can't saddle the second buyer with the problem where the property lien is on that second property and they can all collect from him. He's saying rather that if the second buyer left the problem to the first buyer, left property to with the first buyer, it's exactly like a debt in the first buyer. You come and collect to who has the property first. Does that make sense? Because the unencumbered property in the hands of the first buyer. So why collect from the second buyer? So that's according to Rava. Now,
Yes.
just one thing, guys. I just want to finish on one note and then we're done. So the Gemara cites another ruling. Rava said, if Reuven sold all his fields to Shimon at one time. Now, Reuven is the debtor. Okay? He sold all his fields to Shimon at one time. And Shimon proceeded to sell one field to Levi. And a lender of Reuven's comes forward and wishes to collect a loan from the encumbered properties. The law is that if he wishes, he can collect from this buyer, Shimon, which is the first buyer, and if he wishes, he can collect from this buyer, Levi. So it seems a contradiction, but it's not. I'm going to explain it to you now. Okay. So in this case, the creditor can collect from either Shimon or Levi. Why? Because he may collect from Levi because he can say to Levi, you bought the land that was mortgaged to me. Although Levi had bought the average land directly from Reuven and left him with inferior land, Reuven's lender would have been unable to collect from Levi because the law is that the creditor may not collect encumbered property from a buyer as long as their unencumbered property is in the debtor's possession. This only applies when the buyer bought the land directly from the debtor. In such a case, the rabbis enacted for the benefit of buyers that no land could be collected from them as long as the debtor himself owns land. In the present case, however, where Shimon and Levi are both buyers, no such law applies. This is according to Rashi in Ketubot 92a. Tosfot here says he may also collect from Shimon, for he can say to him, since you bought all of Reuven's field, I'm entitled to lay a claim against you. And though you sold the average land to Shimon, I'm still entitled to collect the inferior land which you have in your possession. So this follows the opinion of Rashi, who holds that a lender is always entitled to collect from inferior land of the debtor. Okay, so how long do we have left before I unpack this?
You have certainly more than 10 minutes.
Yeah, certainly more. It hasn't shown anything else.
All right. So let's just get this again clear. I'm just going to say it again. Rava said, so Reuven is who, guys? He's the original debtor, right? So he owes to a damaged party superior land. He owes to a lender average quality land and the ketubah of a woman inferior quality land. And he sold all his fields to Shimon at one time, who's the first buyer. And then Shimon proceeds to sell one field for those of Levi. Now, listen to this when it says at one time. He didn't buy the superior quality land last. Can you hear the difference in wording? He sold it to him at one time. He never sold him one after the other where there's some rabbinic enactment at all. Do you get what I'm saying? So that's new in this case. In other words, it was a simultaneous purchase on one day. And then Shimon, who's the first buyer, decided to sell one field to those of Levi. And the lender of Reuven's, that's the original debtor, comes forward and he wants to collect the loans from the encumbered property. So the law is that if he wishes, he can collect from either Shimon or Levi. Now, Rava qualifies this ruling. Before we go into the commentary, I'm just going to give you the bottom line. And we didn't state this ruling, except in the case where Levi bought average land from Shimon. For if Levi bought superior and inferior land, Reuven's lender cannot collect from Levi. Guys, why not? Again, Levi is the second buyer. Are you with me, guys?
Yeah.
He's the second buyer. And he bought
superior and inferior.
No. Yes, exactly, Michael. He bought superior and inferior land, Levi. So why can't the creditor, Reuven's collector? Okay, so somebody lent Reuven money. Gavin, it's just
because it's a debt. It's not intermediate land we're referring to.
Okay, but I need you to be a little bit more specific.
Okay, carry on. Sorry, carry on.
No. You're almost there. All right, so guys, listen to this.
No. Well, all the properties were sold on the same day.
No.
And now he's...
No. Let me just repeat. That's a given, but that's not the answer. Just let me repeat.
No, I was building up to the answer, but it's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, well then tell me what it is.
Well, I don't know if I heard the question 100%. I lost concentration for a second.
So what's the question?
So-
Tell me the question.
So my understanding is that there were 3 properties purchased on the same day to Shimon. Reuben sold all these properties on the same day to Shimon.
Correct.
Shimon then sold 2 properties, the inferior property and the superior property to Levi. Correct.
Correct. Very well done. Good, good, man.
Okay. So based on that, there's still property sitting that's in what's it called in Shimon's possession.
Yes.
That the other 3 can take from.
Okay.
And it's what they have a right to. They don't have a right to the other 2 because the buyer has the protection on the other 2.
Okay, so you're right. Let's just be a little bit clear for the reason Michael mentioned is that a lender, Reuven borrowed money from a lender. Now, the lender's entitled to average quality land. So Levi could turn around and said, I left average quality of land with Shimon so that you can collect what is due to you. Superior and inferior quality land is not due to you. That's why I left average land with Shimon, so that if there was a case where there were debts owing, Shimon would have to satisfy you. That's exactly why I only bought superior and inferior quality land. That's what Michael was trying to say, and you're also trying to say that, Gavin.
Yeah, so in this case, I just wanted to get clarity.
Yeah.
There was no damages and there was no ketubah. It was just the creditor involved.
Correct.
Okay.
So
Okay,
what we're saying is that even in a case where Levi bought average quality land, but Shimon also had average quality land left. In that Shimon had more than one field of average quality land, and Levi bought it. The Reuven's lender still cannot collect from Levi because Levi can say to him, I still left you over average land of which you could collect. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So so that's basically where we ended off, and it's very, very straightforward. And obviously, in a case where there's no choice, the creditor can collect from inferior quality land because that was the biblical enactment when there's nothing left and it was upgraded. Now, I'm going to end off on one note. This is an 8b3. Then we've done 8 stuff. The Gemara digresses to discuss another law which applies when a creditor comes to collect a debt from one who bought encumbered properties from the debtor. A buyer said, if Reuven sold a field to Shimon with a guarantee, and a creditor of Reuven comes and attempts to collect the field from Shimon in payment of Reuven's obligation, the law is that Reuven may go and argue the case with the creditor to prevent him from collecting the field. And the creditor may not tell Reuven, you are not my legal opponent in this matter, and I need not respond to your arguments. For Reuven may respond to him, if he exact the land from Shimon, he will come in turn to me demanding the reimbursement of the as per the terms of the guarantee. Therefore, Reuven is considered a concerned party and may personally argue the case with the creditor. And the Gemara even goes further and says those that say that the ruling applies even if Reuven sold the field to Shimon without a guarantee, because Reuven may tell the creditor, I don't want Shimon to have a grievance against me. Reuven is therefore considered a concerned party and he may personally argue the case. So why would Shimon want Reuven to argue the case? Because Reuven might have evidence as to the fact that the debt was paid, and a person is less likely to lie to Reuven because that was where the original discussion took place. You can always lie to a second party, but you can't get away with it if an original party was there and knows what's going on. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's for the protection of Shimon that Reuven is an interested party, because he said, listen, if I'd sold it with a guarantee, I have to pay Shimon back. Therefore, I'm interested. You can't tell me to mind my own business. And I don't want Shimon upset with me, even if I didn't sell it with the guarantee. So therefore, it's my business. And I know that I want you to take an oath to say the truth of what happened, because I've got a different version to what you've got. And you're lying here. So it's on 8b3. That's where we ended. Anything doesn't make sense. It's very straightforward, guys.
It's very clear, Dams. Thanks.
Okay, we finished the 8 stuff, yeah?
Sorry, okay. just throwing this guarantee story.
Okay, we're going to come to deal with the guarantee in the 9th daf.
Okay.
It says, a buyer said, if Reuven sold a field to Shimon without a guarantee, and what the 9th daf, the beginning of the 9th daf discusses is what's this term with a guarantee, without a guarantee, etc.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Cool. Kevin, how are you? Are you okay, Kev?
No, I've gone over it's just a lot for me I can't remember everything all simultaneously. I go over it, then I remember it. So
it's tough. It's tough
It is
stuff.
tough.
I can't recall everything.
No, it takes time.
Makes sense. And you try process, yeah.
So, by the way, in Bava Kamma 14a, Reuven agrees to refund Shimon's money in the event of the field collected by Reuven's creditor. Such a guarantee is actually assumed in the case of a standard sale. If it is omitted from the bill of sale, this is attributed to scribal oversight rather than a deliberate omission. The contract would have to state that the sale was being made without a guarantee specifically. Otherwise, it deemed there is a guarantee, and if it was left out of the written contract, it was deemed to be a scribal oversight. Does that make sense, guys? This is in Bava Kamma.
No, it does.